Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective and the impact this has on training the next generation to live a life consistent with the biblical worldview. Thanks again for joining the show. If you like the show, you've been listening for a while, I'd encourage you to hit the subscribe button and leave a review. That'll let others know the show's worth listening to and certainly help advance the cause of Christian education. So again, thank you for joining and helping us spread the word. Our guest today is Dr. Michael Lindsay. He's the president of Taylor University in Upland, Indiana, and he really embodies our topic today. Today, we're going to talk about what next-level leaders are doing to impact the culture and how your mindset will determine your success. This is important because leadership is important. You just can't say you're a leader. It's not a job description or a title, as you probably know. Listen, leaders do three things. They speak up, they expect excellence, and they learn. And really, it's these three things that make me such a big fan of Dr. Lindsay. So let's explore these qualities. First, what's it mean to speak up? Well, I've spoken about this before on this show, but finding leaders that are outspoken proponents of Christian education at this level, K-12, is not easy. The research clearly shows that a young person's worldview is largely established by age 13, and the chances for salvation are only around 4% as students move into junior high school. Well, despite this reality, many educational leaders have still been reluctant to go all in for K-12 Christian education. Well, that's why we do this podcast. Our post-Christian culture is far too strong for us to ignore biblical worldview training for our children at this level, trusting that they'll accept Christ along the way and then make good decisions as adults. We need more Christians in this country who have been spiritually and intellectually trained to both defend their faith and compete for influence in the public square. Dr. Lindsay speaks up on this issue, and you'll hear from him shortly. He also understands that today's educational leaders are business leaders who should expect excellence. If the best Christian schools and colleges are getting bigger, well, it's probably because they're getting better. Expecting excellence often takes a business mindset. For example, business owners know that there's a price tag that comes with growth, and it will continue to climb as you get bigger. You must be prepared to pay that price or you'll slide the other direction. What you do in a season of surplus will determine your long-term success. Leadership expert, author, and pastor Craig Groeschel writes that the business owner mindset is absolutely critical for leadership success because owners think higher, they see broader, and they care deeper. They feel personally responsible for the success of the organization, so they're courageous innovators, they're disruptors and overcomers. And finally, third, leaders learn. Our guest, Dr. Lindsay, has dedicated 10 years of his life conducting the largest empirical study of American leaders in history. He's conducted interviews and analyses on 550 of America's top figures, including former presidents, alongside leaders of hundreds of Fortune 500 firms and their nonprofit equivalents. Not only has this work made its way into award-winning books, and for that we're grateful, but it's also made its way into his life. Using what we know to execute at a high level is not as easy as it sounds. Often there are dozens of variables outside of our control. But high-level leaders separate themselves by anticipating what they can't control, some of those crises and the conflicts. And they've learned from the best how to build in safeguards that enable them to rise above the storm. So again, great leaders speak up, they expect excellence, and they keep learning. So, Dr. Lindsay, we're talking about you here. So welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on. Great to be here.
Super. We're glad to have you. Let me tell you folks a little bit about Dr. Lindsay in terms of his bio. He's the author of 24 scholarly publications and numerous books, including Faith in the Halls of Power, which was nominated for the Nonfiction Pulitzer Prize, and his award-winning book called View from the Top, which I kind of alluded to in the introductions. He earned his PhD in sociology from Princeton University and graduate theological degrees from Wycliffe Hall in Oxford and Princeton Theological Seminary. He's been on the faculty at Rice University and was president of Gordon College. And he's lectured on 6 continents. My, that's a lot of traveling. And listen to this, in terms of leadership, since he's assumed the presidency at Taylor, the university's experienced significant momentum in admissions, advancement, athletics, community collaboration, both employee and consultant engagement, and faith expression on campus. And that is not the case at every university, to be sure. So we'll start there. Let you brag a little bit because you need to. But why such significant growth at Taylor in terms of your transition as a leader? Because I know you haven't been there for very long. And I heard you speak when you just made that transition into the university. But I know it's a tough one for us, but what are you doing right there that you want to say, hey, listen, I think this is why Taylor is growing, and how's it been going there at Taylor?
Well, I'll just say the Lord has given his blessing, and it's so much more above and beyond that we could ever ask or imagine, but we've been very encouraged. I think that before I came to Taylor, University made a real commitment to clarify what our theological positions were. We have a set of 5 foundational documents that all of our faculty and staff have to affirm either as a candidate or annually. That's been a really good way of sort of making clear who Taylor is, what we stand for, and in the process we've been able to get a lot of similar direction focused on our mission. And if you have a team of folks who are really committed to the mission, they can do a lot of things if the Lord's hand is upon it.
Well, again, as I said in the introduction, I so appreciate your commitment to K-12, and I've heard you speak on several occasions, and I don't think you're just saying that because you want students at Taylor. I think you're saying that because you really get the worldview that we're trying to pass on. Obviously, in K-12, we're built for that mission. Correct? Well, what is it about, again, further K-12 Christian education that really all the way through into Taylor that really drives you to it or drew you to it at one point, and that sparks your interest?
I believe deeply in Christian education, and I think it's important for K-12 schools and universities to work shoulder to shoulder. We're trying to help disciple the next generation, help families to rear a generation of young people who be prepared to carry the grace and truth of Jesus to a world in need. So my wife and I believe deeply in what we're doing in Christian education. I'm a huge fan of K-12 Christian educators. I love to be able to find ways to partner together. And I think that more and more families are seeing that this kind of education makes a huge difference for their kids and for the next generation. COVID was really a hinge moment for our society. It brought to the surface lots of questions that people were feeling about what's the kind of education that our kids are getting. And it's been encouraging to see so many Christian schools thrive in the post-COVID era as more and more families have come to say, that's the kind of education I want for our kids. And at Taylor, we're very excited to be able to partner with Christian K-12 educators. I've been running an annual conference called Next, and I believe it's a great opportunity for Christian educators to see a college campus, but also for us to find ways to work together. And it's my great hope that we can be a blessing to the good work that's happening at your school and so many others around the country.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you're exactly right. Between COVID and the culture, we've often said those things really have been difference makers for Christian education at this level. And you're exactly right. I mean, it really was a wake-up call for a lot of people around our country. And hopefully, and I think that is true. I think it carried over into that college level as well, and where they really start to look at education as a concept, not just this building choice or whatever it was that they bought a house in this district and that's where I'm just assigned, and I don't give it much more thought than that. But if we can think of it in a little bit bigger frame of reference, and that's important. We've been saying that for decades, right? But all of a sudden it took some of those things to bring it out. Well, you mentioned, the biblical worldview at Taylor. What is it? What does biblical worldview teaching look like at a Christian college campus for any of our listeners who might say, well, I get maybe the K-12, but what's it look like at the university level? Are they free to really pass on that biblical worldview in the same way that we're doing at those Christian schools? And how might that look same or different even at that level?
Well, Taylor is one of 4 nationally ranked schools where every student, faculty, and staff member are committed Christians. That's Biola, Wheaton, Taylor, and Gordon fall into that category. And that's a wonderful group that we love to see each of those institutions thrive, and so many others that have a broader network of students that they serve, and they're really committed to that education. For us at Taylor, it's woven into every single class, every lecture that I give. I'm a sociologist, so every undergraduate class I teach on sociology, I'm trying to figure out how do I take the claims of the gospel, put into conversation with sociological theory and research. I want my students to be well equipped to engage the wider discipline of sociology, but with the truth of the gospel. So whether it's the assignments that we give, so I oftentimes will have an assignment where students memorize a passage of scripture that relates to some of the themes in the class and then put that into conversation through a short paper where they're exegeting the passage informed based on the material that we've covered in the class. Or maybe it's in the very topics of what we discuss. So I'm teaching a class about power and stewardship and influence. How do we as Christians think about that from a theological perspective? Or it can also be approached with the ways in which we conduct our classes, the individual class meetings, how we open in prayer. We want to be able to pray for our students, or the kind of pastoral care and academic discipleship we're trying to do with our students every single day. I think that's the kind of thing we experience at Taylor, and my hunch is that it's true at lots of other Christian schools as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yep, and I think that's why we're seeing, and that's a good segue into my next question, we're seeing some of these Christian schools getting better and bigger. And again, that I think is walks hand in hand. And I said that, talking about that, leading with that business owner mindset. And so many of us, like myself, I have 3 degrees, but all in education, and was not trained to run a business. And yet here I find myself as the CEO of a small company. That's what it feels like. And I think for tax purposes, we're a medium-sized company. We're not even a small company anymore. Yeah. So it's much like that university letter. But how do we get some of these leaders out there who are in education to see that, yep, you are running a business now. And as you get bigger, like I said in the introduction, you're going to have to continue to get better. We'll talk about innovation in a minute, but how do we get them just to change that mindset to say you're going to need to shift your thinking a little bit? And I know you've been trained in education, but you need to be really, really good, and it's not going to happen by itself.
Well, I think there's several things. First off, I agree with you. I think the separation between for-profit and not-for-profit, that's a tax classification, but it really doesn't shape how you get the work done. Both of us have to rely upon vision and mission and strategy and direction and organizational culture, all those kinds of things. It's true whether you're running a business or running a school. I have found that probably the most important thing, if you're following leadership as it's taught in the Bible, is it's really primarily driven out of a vision. What has God called you as a community to do? And that could be true if you're starting a laundry business or if you're starting a K-12 school. And then once you have a sense of what the Lord's calling you to do, what's the vision that he's uniquely given you? Because every institution has different kind of backgrounds, cultural context, organizational history that gives you something that's distinctive. How do you live into that distinctiveness so that you can carry out that vision and mission in a way that honors the Lord? At Taylor, we spent some time sort of thinking about our history, because I think always our future in one way or another runs through our past. So we used the 175th anniversary of the university a few years ago to sort of take stock of what has Taylor done over those 175 years, what's made it distinctive, then what might God be doing to call us to a new vision for the future. And a large part of that's going to be informed by where we've come from, but it also is leading us to new horizons or new possibilities. At Taylor, we spent a lot of time and energy of saying, how do we translate an overarching mission or vision, which we all believe and we all support, into organizational actions and behaviors? And how do you develop a strategic plan and annual goals and individual performance metrics, whether you're a faculty member, a staff member, or an administrator? It's taken us a few years to get that all the way through the whole organization, but I can say a lot of the momentum that we've experienced at Taylor is driven deeply by that sort of sense of alignment, where classroom teachers know what the overall direction of the university is for this year. That ties in with the overall 5-year plan of the institution, and that fits in with the 50-year mission and vision of the institution. So if you can create alignment, and if you can be thoughtful about that and talk about it and help people see the connective tissue among each of those stages, man, it's amazing how the Lord can use that to really get great things done in and through you as an organization.
Yeah, and that's perfect. And what you're really talking about then is you're training your people to see the big picture. And like I talked about, to see what's 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And I think we're all scared of that right now because things are just so, especially since COVID, we all said, oh, forget the 5-year strategic plan, maybe even 3's too much, right? Because we don't know what the economy is going to do. And we had the recessions, years ago. And so I think that looking at the big picture makes us nervous in some way because we think strategic planning is so it's just some lofty ideal you put on paper, but you do a SWOT analysis and it is all going to change in 2 months when the economy crashes. So why do it, right? But what you're talking about when we do those things, it it gets people on board with the mission. They are able to, and other leaders are able to be courageous with their capacity for change because they know where the organization's going. And I think we get a little short-sighted when we take that big picture away from our people.
I think it also follows in the way of how vision worked in the Bible, right? So Nehemiah has this sense of calling to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. He gets that vision. He then goes to marshal resources, talks to King Artaxerxes, and then he begins to mobilize people to do it. And he's constantly trying to encourage them to keep at the work. It only took him 52 days to build the wall, but there was a lot of planning and preparation before, and then a lot of work that happened after that. And I think that's probably true for all of us in Christian education.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I love that you brought that up. I'm studying that right now in my own devotions, and I'm going through this Colson Fellows program. I don't know if you're familiar with that, the Colson Center program, and that we're camped out in Nehemiah right now in our devotions, and so I can totally relate, and I have so many good examples because I think it's a great one, too, for going through a capital campaign, which I know you're doing, I'm doing, we're all doing right now as we just continue to get bigger and better. So, yeah, great point there. Well, I've heard you speak on the 5 types of innovation, and I don't have all these memorized, so I'm going to glance here. Structure, process, product performance, brand, and customer engagement. And we don't need to explain all of those to the listeners, but I think that even types of innovation is a unique concept that I don't think I had heard anybody speak on. But I totally agree that really innovation is the answer to increasing market share in this area for Christian schools at all levels. What evidence really attracted you to this idea that really led you to this perspective, and any examples or illustrations that you can give that said, I know this is where we need to spend some time, that led you to say, when I'm going to talk to a group of K-12 educators, I need to talk to them about innovation?
Well, I think clearly one of the things that's driving this is that if you want to grow and strengthen your foundation as an institution, it requires a degree of innovative work. And that's basically how it's worked for millennia. So that's not a new idea. But we live in an environment where we're in an increasingly competitive marketplace for ideas. So in order to win families to be able to see that Christian education is worthy of the investment, not just financial investment, but also time and energy, they need to see that you're doing something that's new, that you're bringing something to help empower the next generation. So we've certainly seen that at the university level, but it's true at K-12 level as well, that as you bring on, for example, a new sport, if you offer that, or a new student leadership program, or a new honors track, or a new certificate program, maybe it's something in pre-engineering or entrepreneurship. All of these are things that maybe you used to do in graduate school, but today we're now introducing them at grades 9, 10, 11. What's happened is that as human capital has just taken off over the last 50 years, the barriers for people to get into these fields has dropped and dropped. And now, because of the internet and the ways in which people are learning, you find folks who are in middle school are talking about concepts that we used not to talk about until grad school. And so because of that, we're having to find ways to be innovative in what we're offering. And certainly at Taylor, we've been really committed to academic innovation and academic entrepreneurship. That is, how do you build academic programs or student life kind of experiences that families would say, wow, that's a value added that I would not have expected. So it might be that you decide you're going to dedicate your spring break to a missions experience outside the United States. And every student is going to get that before they graduate. Not only are you giving them a global experience so they get a stamp in their passport, but you're also exposing them to a much wider world of God's kingdom. And we always learn new and different things when we go to different settings. So that travel experience gives a chance to introduce different ideas. That's an example of an innovation that can really fundamentally change the value proposition. So now families feel like, hey, we're getting something that you don't get just at the public school because you're taking them to an experience they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. That's the kind of innovation that I think is making the real difference. And, Cy, of the different kinds of innovations, the most powerful innovations are ones that combine types. So, if you think about the iPhone, when Apple introduced the iPhone, it was bringing together many different things. Not only were you getting the power of the internet to be, in your pocket, but you could also now stream music in a way that you used to have to carry around, an iPod. And it gave you a camera that you always had with you, and that you could check the stock market, or you could get your email, or you could have social media. And all of these get combined onto a small little device that you can hold in your pocket. It's an example of multiple innovations brought together in one. That's actually what I think most families are looking for in the kind of education that they're seeking for their kids. And it doesn't matter if they're in first grade or 12th grade or graduate school. People are saying we want an education that brings together creative, innovative ideas and puts them together in a unique combination. And the great thing about Christian education is the truth of the gospel can unite all of that. So we can bring all of those discussions, all of those ideas under the lordship of Christ. And I've just found that the great Christian schools around the country are doing that innovative work every single day.
Yeah, great words. I couldn't agree more, because I'm always preaching to our peers, listen, don't let the culture move and then react. And I'll say that, later, because I know we're going, get out in front and use the mind God's given you. And we'll talk about that. But I love this whole concept. And certainly, couldn't agree more from a practical standpoint. We're doing things now at the K-6 level that I certainly didn't do in high school. You probably didn't even do in high school. And you're much younger than me, I know. But boy, we were just introducing typing back in the day, in 8th, 9th, 10th grade. And now, we've got 4th, 5th graders doing CAD and doing Prezis, they're called, which are these nice PowerPoints, and they're up in front of their class and using their clickers and they're being trained to do things that, like I said, I know there's corporate CEOs out there doing these things, and they're doing them at 10, 11, 12 years old, and it's just becoming the new norm. But those parents are looking for some of those innovative things. Any suggestions for those K-12 listeners out there that you say, okay, let me tell you, since I've got the college president here and those K-12 leaders out here, what kinds of things do you think they need to be innovations? Do you think that they need to be really maybe focusing on to get kids prepared for that next level of education? Anything that you would recommend that stands out?
Well, I think the commentator and columnist David Brooks has said that the artificial intelligence revolution is not changing the world like the iPhone changed the world. It's changing the world the way the internet changed the world. I think he's right. I think artificial intelligence is going to fundamentally restructure how we do everything. And clearly, we care about academic integrity, so we don't want students using artificial intelligence to do their homework. But there's many ways you can use artificial intelligence to simplify work. And what used to take people hours and hours to get done now could probably be done within 3 to 5 minutes through artificial intelligence. So if I were a Christian educator thinking about how do you harness the benefits of artificial intelligence while keeping at bay some of the bad sides, that's clearly going to be something driving what we do for the next 50 years. And figuring that out sooner and earlier will help you to be more innovative within your respective community and marketplace.
Yeah, great point. We've got to get out in front of that. Couldn't agree more. And can you imagine getting all kinds of students coming into Taylor University at age 21 and 22 who already have a biblical worldview established when it comes to AI? They've been taught how to use it the right way when they get to college, and they're ahead of the curve. Boy, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Well, that's what we're counting on. That's why we're in partnership with you guys. You get them in good shape before you send them to us. So hopefully we can just build upon standing on the shoulders of giants. That's what I love about Christian education.
Yeah, totally agree. Yep. And we want to be able to do that and like I said at the outset, we want to do that from the earliest ages, because we know the adversary wants to give them a perspective of AI as well, right? How to use it for the wrong things and use it for the wrong ways. And it's out there, and you don't have to go searching for that angle. It will come to you. And we want to beat him to the punch. And we want to say, okay, listen, we created this because we have this incredible creative capacity in our minds that God's given us because we're made in his image. So now let's make sure we use that for good. And just like everything else, it can go the other direction. So we have to get into that mind that, oh boy, artificial intelligence, you're right. I mean, it probably needs, I don't know when it needs to be introduced, but these kids get it, right? Because they're using it all the time. So I would say probably upper elementary, junior high even, they are they understand full well how AI is being used on their phone, how it's already being used in all their search engines. I mean, they get it. They understand better than most adults why they're being fed the information they're being fed. They understand those algorithms even at 12, 13, 14. They think this is how technology is supposed to work. Why would you give me something I don't want to see? Tech is supposed to give me what so they get the AI behind it, and they want to use it like I said, even more so than some of the adults do, for sure. Well, finally, let's talk about your leadership research. I mean, amazing work that you did. I can't imagine 10 years. Wow. Congratulations. I mean, man, you had a lot to be proud of there. Certainly an incredible wealth of information. But what took you down that path? Was that just your personality? Have you always gravitated to this topic? Or did you say, you know what, I got to figure out what all these people have in common?
My dad was president for PGA of America in the golf business, and I think everybody's dissertation is in one way or another a little bit of autobiographical. So I was interested in understanding my dad and the world that he inhabited. He was a business leader in professional athletics, something I really didn't know or experience, and had been around it, but I didn't fully understand it. So when I was in grad school, I began thinking about what is it that makes leaders tick, and I began looking at empirical studies and found that actually there weren't a ton of big studies that have been done. I found that the last comprehensive study of senior leaders was done in 1971 by a group of researchers at Columbia University. They interviewed 545 people, so my goal was 546. And as you noted, I got to 550 and I called it quits, but it was a great, great study. My most recent book, Hinge Moments, is really about change and transition and how leaders think about it in their own lives and the lives of their institution. And it's been a great project to be able to bring some of the insights of great leaders like, Colin Powell or George W. Bush or Condoleezza Rice, but also business leaders and nonprofit leaders, and how they think about their own faith journeys as it relates to the work that they do in leading their communities, their organizations, or the wider culture.
Yeah, I love that. Yep. And as you brought it up, and I was going to go there, Hinge Moments. Extraordinary leaders, rising, using those crisis moments. Like I said at the outset, they have those moments, conflicts. We all have them, right? And how they turn those into opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about that? Tell us what Hinge Moments. Give us the Cliff Notes version there.
Basically, I found that just as there are 5 stages of grief, there are 7 stages of transition. And it starts in our gut when we begin to sort of anticipate maybe that God is leading us to make a change or transition. Most of us in our bodies actually come to the point of a change or transition even before our minds have fully appreciated or made the decision. So I talked to a lot of people about how they began to get signals or signs that God was maybe calling them to move to a new community or take a new job or expand their family. And then gradually they go through this process. And in many ways, when you make a change, it's a difficult decision because there's a sense of loss, giving up some things that you love or appreciate and needing to be reminded that there's more opportunities that the Lord has in store for you. And so I walk through these 7 stages of transition and how you to make the most of it. But the nice thing about it is that it's kind of like a roller coaster. You start off and you're at a certain level, and then you kind of dip down in your confidence. But eventually you rise back up and you end up in a place that's even higher than where you were before. That's true for most of us, that as we grow, develop, and mature, change and transition can be sort of the crucible in which God matures our faith, deepens our commitment, and strengthens our soul. And so I try to tell the story of some people who I think did that well and give some practical advice for how we as organizational leaders can do that in our own contexts.
Yeah, good. And did really that book merge in any way in terms of these leadership traits with faith in the halls of power and view from the top? I mean, did you find some commonalities in all 3 that you said, oh, this is going to play well down through the years in terms of my own research?
Absolutely. I mean, great leaders are people who serve and are committed to serving other people. Jesus made that very clear in his example, and we can point to scores of examples of people who thought of themselves less and thought about others more, and were willing to try and bless and serve the people on their teams, the people at their schools or organizations, and the communities that they serve. And so Hinge Moments tells the stories of people who are willing to sort of bring that servant leadership mindset into the work they're doing. And it was true in Faith in the Halls of Power, as well as in View from the Top, that those people who are really great are people who've learned how to serve.
Yeah, so true. And I think people, I just think they largely underestimate that almost all leaders have gone through some kind of journey like that. And that sometimes they see these people that have written books like yourself or been college presidents and others, and, they just don't necessarily have that grasp of, there's a lot of struggle back there, a lot of stories that you've missed, a lot of hinge moments in the life of Michael Lindsay that, boy, I could have gone this direction, that direction. And obviously that by God's grace, You had the courage to face some of those things. And like I said, and really anticipating some of those things, knowing that, yep, this is going to be how it works out. I'm not going to achieve great things just coasting through life. And some of those stories are very powerful. It's good that you wrote them.
Well, it's certainly true in my life that if I had to say what have been the most powerful crucibles of change in my life, they've typically come through moments of great setback, disappointment, or challenge. And so that's true for me. It's true for everybody. And I do think you're right, probably, Si. We kind of look at people's lives and we just assume, hey, everything on the surface looks great and they're smiling and it's all been easy. When in fact, beneath the surface, there's a lot of struggle and challenge and despair and doubt that sort of shaped who they are. But I have found that those people who are the most effective are people who have taken advantage of those crucible moments and found them to be moments where they could deepen in their faith. Psalm 37 is a really great psalm to meditate on. Delight yourself in the Lord. He will give you the desires of your heart. It's not about you saying, okay, God, here are all the things that I want you to do. It's actually just saying, okay, Lord, how do you want to change my perspective? And because of that, I'm trusting that you will guide me and direct me. And I love that image in Isaiah 30 where it says, whether you turn to the left or the right, there will be a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. We have to get ourselves quiet enough to listen to that voice and to be prepared to follow the direction of the Lord, even if it's not our first choice. But I tell the story in Hinge moments of my own journey of giving up a job that I loved, that I thought I would do for the rest of my life. But out of a sense of obedience, I felt the Lord was calling me to sort of put it on the altar. And I grieved that. It took me over a year to get to a place where I was comfortable with it. But as it turns out, the Lord has led me to pleasant places. I have experienced such great joy and enthusiasm. And I would not be a tailor if I had not gone through some of those crucible moments. And I can just testify the goodness of the Lord, that he will lead you to really great places if you're willing to say, Lord, I'm your servant. I'm here to do your leading. Guide me and direct me, and I will listen to your voice. And so that's kind of what I try to tell in the book of Hinge Moments, and also try to encourage our students as well.
Oh, yeah. And I can imagine looking at Faith in the Halls of Power, in that particular book, you ran across people just like yourself who said the exact same thing and had incredible stories. And I don't think that gets enough airtime, so to speak, because there's probably a lot more out there than what I think the general public realizes that relied on their relationship with the Lord to carry them carry them through. And there are many men and women that still in the secular textbooks that those stories don't get told. And I know that's one of the great things we get to do in Christian education is say, hey, let me tell you the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. Let me tell you the story behind this person, because not only did they go do great things for the United States of America and the world, they were a believer, and they didn't get there without God's guidance. So that had to be uncovered in your work as well, and that's great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite example is I interviewed Karen Hughes, who is counselor to President George W. Bush, highest woman to be appointed to a senior White House staff position in U.S. history. And she wrote a book about her experience, and she takes it off of a funny episode that happened on the campaign trail where they were approaching a city on a train, and the conductor came through and said, we are 10 minutes from our next destination, which was Normal. I think it was Normal, Iowa. He said, we're 10 minutes from normal. And she said, that's what my life feels like. I'm always 10 minutes away from what normal should be. And I do think that that's probably true. When you're in leadership, it never sort of goes exactly as planned. But as long as you say, okay, Lord, I'm 10 minutes from normal, but I'm here to follow your leadership, he can do really great things in and through us.
Oh, that's well said. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's great. I think we can all relate to that. You can't work within my profession. You can't work with teenagers and adolescents and think you are in any sort of normal setting. Yeah, you're always feeling like you're 10 minutes from normal. Well, listen, as we close, if they want to know more about Taylor University or they want to know more about Dr. Michael Lindsay, what should they do? Where can they go? How can they contact you?
I'd love for you to follow up on social media. I'm at DMichaelLindsay on X and Instagram, as well as you can check out our website, www.taylor.edu. I'd love to hear from you. My email is super easy, president@taylor.edu.
Yeah, yep. And I will say he responds and does great work. Well, thank you again so much for joining me. It's been a great discussion. And let me make 2 quick chalkboard points for you to consider remembering here as I close. Point number 1, and I'll wrap up the show here. Successful leaders have an owner's mindset. We talked about that. The best organizations are not just getting bigger, they're getting better. Leaders do things that help them see the big picture, and then they move courageously through change. As I said, we can't wait for the culture to move and then respond. He's given us minds for thinking and reasoning and creating. So we've got to passionately work to make our schools the best possible environment for training and scholarship, whether that's K-12 or the college level also. And point number 2, extraordinary leadership is not found in simple steps. Extraordinary leadership can be very complex and even messy because human behavior is so varied. Yet there are patterns in the leadership research that give us reliable insight into best practices. Extraordinary leaders separate themselves by anticipating what they can't control and have learned to use these moments as opportunities to move forward. As Dr. Lindsay said, there's Hinge moments, and it's a great book. I'd encourage you to get that one as well. So that's our lesson for today. And now you know more. And when you know more, you can do more. You not only think differently, but you can act differently. You can make a change, live out those convictions, and say no more if you must. So again, thank you for joining me today on Clearly Christian Podcast, and I trust that now you know more about what next-level leaders are doing to impact the culture like Dr. Lindsay, and how your mindset will determine your success. Again, if you like the show, you've been listening, again, hit the subscribe button, leave a review. That'll certainly let others know the show is worth checking out. I certainly would appreciate that. And remember, as I say every show, the only way we're going to turn things around in our country is to increase the number of people who hold a biblical worldview and live that out. And the greatest hope we have to get there is Christian education. Again, thank you for joining me today. I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this has been Clearly Christian Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.